2024, and you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. I'm your host, Chris Presnell, live coming at you from beautiful Portland, Oregon in the USA. And we got a lot to go over today. Apologize for the tech issues. I kind of semi-fried my laptop. It'll be fine. It's going to take a little while to come back up, but that's why I had to switch things around. Hopefully you found this channel. If not, hopefully you can catch this on the replay. Got a lot to go over today. I'm running this from my phone, and I just set this up, so hopefully this looks okay. Anyways, moving past that, today on the show we're going to talk about Seika Izawa versus Park Si Yoon. We're going to talk about Road to UFC updates. We've got a lot to go over today, and basically, adjust something real quick. Basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you kind of like a lot of updates about Road to UFC, a lot of thoughts, and break two fights for you. Now, there's been a couple fights starting to come out. I've broken one. A friend of mine broke two more. So, and then I've got two I'm going to give you, and then two more that I may been, maybe in the next day or two might throw your way. But let's first get into Seika Izawa versus Park Si Yoon. So this went down last Sunday in Japan. Park Si Yoon, the deep atomweight champion, Seika Izawa, the Ryzen super atomweight champion. One of my biggest criticisms of Seika Izawa is that she's been fighting in this middleweight class, super atomweight. And it's kind of hard to know. I mean, really, I know it's just a couple pounds different, but it's been hard to know exactly how she matches up against atom weights, straw weights, when she's kind of been going on this middleweight class. And what I was really glad to see was that she was actually going down to 105 to fight against Park Si Yoon. This fight, I wasn't sure quite how it was going to go. I thought Park Si Yoon, she's been on a really big surge recently. Of course, Seika Izawa been on like a 12-0 tear, so she's been on her own surge recently. And for her, I didn't know how she would be able to hold up to some of the physicality, the boxing of Park Si Yoon, but apparently really, really well. In the fight, Seika Izawa pretty much ran through Park Si Yoon. She was flowing on the feet and was able to take Park down in both rounds that the fight went, and eventually submitted Park Si Yoon with like a ninja choke in round 2. Really superb grappling on display from Seika Izawa. And yeah, she's the top, you could argue the top female fighter in all of Asia right now. Now that she's beat Park Si Yoon, and I feel like she's got a lot of good hype behind her. I'm short of calling her like a big star, just because I don't know if she's got a super big social media following just yet. I don't know how many people, especially in Japan, are really all that familiar with her still. And I don't know what's behind that. You see some fighters in Japan really take off. Others can be really dominant but still have a little bit of a slower roll. So I don't really know how big Seika is in Japan. And, I think with Seika Izawa, what I always see, and I've honestly been one of these voices, but I'm starting to change my tune a little bit, talking about what's next for Seika Izawa. A lot of people, including myself, have said, she's running out of options in Japan. She's really fought just about everyone that there is to fight. And for her to really bloom into this big star, she's got to fight with the UFC. She's got to fight more internationally. And, by now she's, I think, 27, 28 years old. And I'm starting to change my tune a little bit on this, guys. And here's why. I think that as fans and even as media, sometimes we have our own desires for how a fighter's career should go, what kind of path they should follow. And I think we can be too quick to impose and sort of demand that fighters follow our desired career path for them. And I think that in some ways, all that we really want is we want to see Seika Izawa reach her full potential as a star. We want her to fight the best possible fighters possible, and to, by going to the UFC, by fighting in their strawweight division, fighting against, Xiong Jingnan or Jessica Andrade or Mackenzie Dern, or I don't know, eventually maybe Zhang Weili. Fighters like that we really want to see MMA in Japan grow to be this internationally respected, country once again. And so I think a lot of ways our intentions of wanting her to move to the UFC to have these bigger fights are well intentioned. I really think they are. But I also think that we should give the fighter the right to let their career unfold in the way that they enjoy it the most. It seems like you got to know, if Seika Izawa was hell-bent on getting to the UFC and fighting the best of the best there, I feel like that could have already happened by now. And I don't really know what Rizin's contracts are like, but it seems like they're not totally the kind of promotion that, like, if a fighter has one thing on their mind in getting to the UFC, that they're at least open to exploring that possibility. Not to say they're going to grant that immediately, but Nobuyuki Sakakibara, the head of Rizin, has met with Dana White. It seems like they might be exploring Kai Asakura potentially going over there. I don't know about Kyoji Horiguchi. Things kind of seem tied up with PFL with him. But at least like they have some respect for the fighters' wishes, that they're not just gonna put them under lock and key for the next 5 years under contract. So I feel like Seika Izawa, from what I can see, she wants to stay in Japan. She likes competing in front of people from her home country every single time. And, with that, she gets a lot of support from the crowd. A lot of her friends and family can come to the fight. She doesn't have to travel too far. It's really comfortable for her being able to fight in Japan. And she's also talked about not necessarily fighting like into her 30s that much. She may be just a couple years left in the sport. So for her to enjoy MMA to the most that she can means just staying at home, fighting in Japan, fighting with Rizin. Seems like she has a good relationship with them. So if that's what really makes her happy, and I don't know what she's getting paid with Rizin, but I would think on the, she's one of their more reliable, frequent, and one of the names that they've built the sport or built the brand around her. Then who's to say that she should do differently? I know we all want to see the best fight the best, but there are other ways for fighters from certain countries that do have like a built-in ecosystem like Japan does, where you can go all the way up to Rizin and you could stay there for your whole career if you really wanted to. If you were fighting in Europe, you could go towards like a KSW or an Octagon route. There's a couple places in the world where you can not fight in the UFC but still have a pretty lucrative career ahead of you. Again, not sure what fighters get paid in those organizations, but they're at least filling pretty big arenas, and they're putting their fights on pay-per-view. So I'd like to think hopefully they're making decent money there, but don't totally know. So that's my thoughts on Seika Izawa. She's a great talent. Personally, yeah, I would love to see her go to the UFC and just test herself against the best there. But if fighting in Japan, staying there is what she really wants, then I can support that too. All right, now moving on to another bit of news announced with women's MMA this week, and that was Stamp Fairtex moving up to strawweight in one championship. Now for them, that's 125 pounds, currently at atomweight, which is their 115-pound division, fully hydrated. What I mean by those quotes there, but she is moving up and fighting the champ Xiong Jingnan on September 6th in Denver, Colorado, in the main event of 168. There's a lot of a lot of crazy things about this fight. I almost like assumed that they're going to make this fight. Just it seemed like there was a little bit of calling out back and forth. One social media kind of teasing, hey guys, do you want to see this fight? And I was like, okay, here we go. They're about to make this fight. This is literally the only option available for Xiong Jingnan, short of signing someone outside of the promotion. So I knew it was going to happen at some point. I just didn't know that they were going to announce it 6 months, guys, in advance. How often do we get fights announced 6 months in advance? The latest UFC fight that I know of that is on the board is in the middle of July. The Marina Agapova fighting Luana Santos. This is in September. Granted, the other crazy thing about this is that Stamp already is on the books for early June to defend her belt against Denise Zamboanga. A little bit risky by One Championship of booking this very, very important headliner for this important card in Colorado and double booking a fighter, and Stamp just fighting 3 months before fighting in Colorado. So I'm sure they're really hoping that, Stamp gets a quick finish here and doesn't take too much damage, because if she were to have to drop out due to injury, then that could be pretty brutal for One Championship. I don't know, they do have a co-main event there, Liam Harrison versus Superlek, which could be a main event. I don't know if it's like your sell out the Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado kind of main event. Since it is a Muay Thai fight, don't know how many fans are all that familiar with some of these Muay Thai fighters. And I also thought it was interesting just putting a Asia versus Asia fight in the main event. I mean, I know Stamp Fairtex is overall one of their bigger stars, but it really just shows me that they do want to build Stamp Fairtex not just as a big star in Thailand, Southeast Asia, but a global star. They're wanting to really help fans latch onto her. She did fight at that last Colorado show back last year in May. So they're bringing her back to the U.S., back to Colorado. I think that's a smart idea, and I think they are totally hoping to let Xiong Jingnan's loss be Stamp Fairtex's game. I think, personally, that they would love to fold the strawweight division and have Stamp Fairtex hold these two belts and kind of have an Anatoly Malikin situation. So, basically where she's holding belts of multiple divisions, really only one actually kind of exists just for the optics of it. And then, hey, if 2 years down the line, someone gets signed to One Championship in the strawweight division, Stamp can defend against that. Very weird overall how this is all unfolding. But yeah, let me scoot over just a tad bit. There we go. Really weird overall. And obviously my criticism is not for the athletes themselves. This sounds like a great fight. I think it should be really exciting. Happy that Xiong is finally getting a fight booked in her own weight class. She had that custom rules fight last year, but I don't know what the relationship is between One Championship and Xiong Jingnan. It doesn't seem like it's great right now. Chatri has criticized her last performances as being boring, and maybe she is starting to kind of coast later in her career a little bit. I don't know. Her last performances have been a little bit slow, a little bit tepid. But Chatri has criticized her a little bit, and then she has also, I don't know if this move is permanent, but she is now training at a new gym in Bali, Indonesia called The Block, which is, I think it's still kind of in its soft opening phase, but I've seen on her social media that she's been training there quite a bit. So, and Huang, I'll answer that question in just a second. But so I don't know. She used to train at Evolve MMA, which is also owned by Chatri, and so she is now training elsewhere. So I don't know what their relationship is like. It seems like she's kind of at the end of her career. She's talked about retirement, so it seems like one is trying to use the end of Xiong Jingnan's career to try to build Stamp Fairtex's career. But But yeah, very, very interesting overall. The Custom Rules fight, Huang, was last year, and it was basically like a 3 minute round cage boxing fight where, small gloves in a cage, but basically boxing rules, or I guess it was all just like fists. I don't remember if they could, I think they might have been able to use knees and elbows too, but it was like Muay Thai without kicks. Can't remember who she fought, but it is a custom rules fight, and for Tapology, custom rules fights do not count as pro MMA fights. So it was basically an exhibition fight is what it was. I think they gave her that fight just to kind of keep her busy. But yeah, the Ball Arena in Colorado, that is ultimately an 18,000 seat arena. Their first show was 6,000 seats, and obviously one championship. They're going to block off a third of the arena, so it's probably going to be more like a 12,000 seat arena. I saw on their website. So the question is, why are they promoting this event? Why are they signing a main and a co-main event 6 months in advance? I think the impulse there is that they're wanting to sell as many tickets as possible. I know every promotion wants to do that, but like they really, really want to do that. They really need this event to be big. They want to be able to claim to sell out the Ball Arena so that they can basically use this as like a selling point for other states to legalize their rule set. They've got Georgia and they've got Colorado, but they want to be able to show, hey, we can sell out big arenas, we can bring all this business, which is interesting because they do give away a lot of comp tickets for their events. They gave away thousands of comp tickets for their last Colorado show. Kind of hard to call it a sellout, but I looked on their website and they do also have like, you can do like pre-sale tickets. There's also a big button for corporate packages, basically where businesses in the Denver area can buy large blocks of seating for a business. So I think that's a really smart way to market things, to try and fill things up as much as possible, give discounts, also potentially attract some new sponsors out of that as well. So I do think that is really interesting. They're trying to get a foothold in Denver. I think the best way to get a foothold in Denver, personally, is I would love to see them bring back their One Warrior series, but have smaller shows in Denver and smaller arenas. Get some American fighters in there. You got gyms like Elevation in Colorado, where they can bring in local fighters that are coming up, sign them to one championship. I think that'd be a really good way to have more events throughout the year and not have to worry about selling things out, still get a foothold, and also sign some local fighters as well. That'd be another great way to try to sell tickets for this Denver show. So yeah, interesting stuff going on with 168. That's kind of my thoughts on that. Moving now to Road to UFC. So by now, I believe all or most of the fighters have been contacted that they want to participate in the season. Something's still being worked out with some of the weight classes. Not everything, I think, is totally settled just yet, but the strawweight and flyweight tournament was pretty much figured out weeks ago. Now, those are the weight classes managed by Mick Maynard. The weight classes managed by Sean Shelby, bantamweight, featherweight, and above. He notoriously can be a little bit slower than Mick. Mick is usually really, really fast. So he got those weight classes worked out a little while ago, and those fights are pretty much done. As for me, I think I've figured out about 26, 27 of the total roster of 40 fighters, 40 including if they're doing 4 non-tournament fights. So what I'm not sure on just yet is the lightweight tournament. I've heard conflicting things. I've heard that they are doing it. I've heard that they're not doing it. And I need to check in with some fighters still about that. I've heard a couple names for that, for lightweight, even potentially welterweight fighters that would be non-tournament, but not totally sure if they've been contacted about non-tournament fights or tournament fights. Featherweight and bantamweight, those fighters were supposed to know by about this time this week. And so some of those fights are finally starting to come together as well. But flyweight, the fight that I've already broken and told you all about is Choi Dong-hoon versus Jinyu Shiye, finalist from last year's Road to UFC season. Today, my friend Jack Bijek on Instagram, and I've posted about these as well on Instagram. You can get all the info there. He posted 2 fights between Bargang Jala Isa and sorry, I'm blanking on that fight. Bargang's fighting. Also, the other one is Daramisi is fighting Ren Ozaki, 6-0-2 bantamweight fighter. Oh, the other guy is Kantaraj Agasa from One Championship. I did confirm with his management that he is out of his One Championship contract. He battled with one over the last year. He's finally out of that, and he will be fighting Bargang Jala Isa. So 2 bantamweight fights there for you. I think Kantaraj is a great addition. Love to see him in there. And honestly, we're going to see a lot of, I think last year, pretty disappointing with the Indian fighters, but this year they should be quite a bit better. I know of at least 4, kind of 5. There might even be more. One of them I'm like super excited about, one of my top Indian prospects, and I can't tell you who that is just yet because I was told to that he wanted to announce his fight. So I'm waiting on that one. But you saw Kiran Singh and Priya Sharma, Kantaraj Agasa, who's 12-3. He is 32 years old, so he is technically above the requirements for Road to UFC. So you're seeing them fudge on some of these things, even some fighters coming off a loss in Road to UFC as well. But love those 2 fights. I don't know much about Ozaki. He's been kind of on the down low in his career. Young guy, only 6-0-2. But yeah, both those guys back in, Daramisi and Bargang Jala Isa. They both have won outside of their last appearance on Road to UFC. As far as Indonesia, so this is interesting. I think it's very possible that we don't see any Indonesian fighters in Road to UFC Season 3. I think at the end of the day, they may find something, pull something together, be able to either find someone that has a connection to Indonesia or just grab someone, the best fighter that they can off the stands. But I've been going back and forth with different people about this, and we literally don't know who they would pick for Road to UFC. All the guys from last year, I think, probably won't do it. Windry Patalima is possible, but most likely he is going to fight again for One Pride this summer in Bali. Which, by the way, guys, mark your calendar for this Bali show. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but mark your calendar for this Bali show in June, where they're bringing in co-promoting with WLF. It's going to be like so many of One Pride's top fighters are all fighting at this show. And honestly, I'm like, is WLF, like the pressure's on them to bring a squad of fighters to match One Pride, because One Pride is bringing their A+ game to this WLF show. Really excited about that. But a lot of fighters that I thought would be in maybe Road to UFC, or at least a good possibility, I think are going to be on this One Pride versus WLF show. I think Yudi Kayati is a possibility still, even though he did lose his last fight. I need to check in on that. I would say he's probably your best chance at being in the season of all the fighters. But yeah, I've literally gone down the line of all the like, you know, One Pride champions, Road to UFC alum, and I don't know who's going to be in it. I don't think Gugun Guzman is going to be in the season. He didn't make the UFC Combine Academy. They could throw him in there if they really need someone in their bantamweight tournament just for Indonesia, but he is 33 years old. He's coming off a loss, and he didn't have a great performance in his last Road to UFC. Or sorry, he's coming off wins, but he came his last Road to UFC performance was not that great. So I don't know. I think it is very possible we don't see any Indonesians this year, which would be a huge shame if the UFC goes to Jakarta in September for a show, has Road to UFC semifinals, and doesn't have any Indonesians. What I think the UFC should do, I think this needs to be a rebuilding year for Indonesia. Put these guys in Cage Warriors, let the champions defend titles in One Pride. They're co-promoting with different promotions, so they're able to get some, international experience that way too. Let this be a rebuilding year. And maybe in the fall, if you're going to Jakarta, stack the semifinals for Road to UFC with tons of Indonesians in non-tournament fights. That's what I would do to give a good show to the Indonesian fans. If you are going to Jakarta, I haven't heard anything one way or the other if they're going to do that, but I think that's the most likely window for the UFC going to Indonesia this year, and the most likely place for the Road to UFC semifinals. So that's how I would do it. But yeah, guys, maybe no Indonesians this year. Now, here's 2 fights, brand new fights for you for Road to UFC, both in the strawweight division. First up, fighting in the strawweight division, you've got Kieran Singh from Indonesia fighting Feng Chao San. Kieran Singh is a big unknown, really big unknown for India. That was kind of a wild card. And even UFC roster tracker on Twitter posted that she had signed with the UFC, and everyone was like, what in the world? Found out that it was actually for Road to UFC that she's been signed. And so she's going to be fighting 8-2 fighter from China, Feng Chao San, who's 22 years old, and is coming off of a win over Miki Motono of Japan, where she submitted her by armbar. Honestly, one of, I think, the top 3 women's prospects in China right now, if not maybe number 2. Really great fighter, trained by kind of legend, veteran Chinese fighter Yuan Chuanbo out in Guangzhou, China. She also has a spot in the UFC Academy this year, so she'll be at the PI, she went through the combine. She'll be training at the PI as well. So she is an excellent fighter. She's gotten pretty far and has looked pretty good despite not training at a massive gym or being in the PI system for too long, and for just being 22 years old. So I think she has a really high ceiling, and I think she'll probably have her way in this fight. But originally, the thing with Kieran Singh, originally, the UFC wanted to bring in Sonam Zumba, another Indian fighter. They wanted to bring her into the tournament. They couldn't get her, so they brought in Kieran Singh. Kieran Singh actually has a TKO win over Sonam Zumba. So there is that. I don't know much about her. I watched a couple of her fights recently as we're working through some Tapology stuff with her record. But that will go down in the strawweight tournament for Road to UFC. The other fight, Dong Huaxiang, probably my top women's prospect out of China. She is going to be fighting Priya Sharma, who I'd say is probably another pretty good prospect out of India. She is 5-1, and she's been training, weirdly enough, with Amanda Ribas and Marcelo Ribas out in Brazil. And honestly, some very similar personalities. I can see how they would get along really well. But her last fight was in Brazil with the promotion SFT. She won a UFC or a unanimous decision there. So she's a solid fighter. I don't know if she's UFC level yet, but we're going to find out. She's going to fight Dong Huaxiang, who is, I don't know that her record's totally accurate just yet, but we have her at 11-2 right now. But she has been flirting kind of with the UFC for a long time. I reported that she had signed with UFC coming from WLF last fall. That actually fell through. So she went back to WLF, but they figured things out, and she has signed to fight in Road UFC against Priya Sharma. So 2 great fights. I imagine we'll probably know the other 2 strawweight fights coming up pretty soon. But I will let you know some other fights as well coming up very soon this weekend. All right, let's get to some of your questions. We got a lot of them. All right, let's see if we can take a look at these. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull these up on my computer and I will answer them one by one. Won't be putting them up on the screen today, but I will get to them nonetheless. I think this is just reinforced that I should probably look at getting a new laptop this year. I've had this one since 2016, 2017. So coming up on 7 years, and probably it's starting to, it's getting in its like slow down phase. So should probably look at getting a new one here soon. Hence why it's taking so long to load. This weekend we've got not a whole lot of Asian MMA. There's 2 fights with 1 Friday fights. We've got a JCK event going down, JCK Fight Night 81, which I don't know if you guys saw. I could see some of you potentially asking about JCK Bantamweight champion and Zhang Weili training partner Wang Xiaoxiang fighting in Road UFC. He will not be fighting in Road UFC because on April 13th, he will be defending his belt against Luo Tianlong in JCK. So JCK, what they're doing now, they've kind of transitioned to more of a traditional format, but they will still be doing a smaller version of their format, which was kind of tournament based. I don't know all the ins and outs, kind of round robin focused, but Wang Xiaoxiang and 7 other bantamweights will be fighting against each other. And first up is all of them are going to fight each other on April 13th, and Wang Xiaoxiang is defending his belt there. So don't know if you saw that. All right, so I'm going to eventually get into a lot more Zhang versus Yan stuff. I've been scripting, watching tape, analyzing, dissecting, planning all the video, hoping to film that probably tomorrow in its entirety. Excited about that. So some of this stuff I may even defer to that video. But James, you said that you've been in a lot of arguments this week. Oh, I bet you have. Out of the blue with Xiaonan fans. They claim Xiaonan has more time to tape study Weili. Well, I think they both have had about the same amount of time. They signed with the UFC at about the same time, and they both had a similar amount of fights in the UFC. So I think they both have a lot of tape study. And for Yan Xiaonan, she's had, maybe not as many scheduled 5-round fights, but she's fought strikers. She's fought a lot of pretty good grapplers. She's fought Carla Esparza. She's fought Mackenzie Dern. And that's something I'm going to talk about in my tape study, is sort of how she could fare on the ground. So I do think that both have had a lot of time to tape study. And I can tell, especially with Zhang, and we've talked about that at length, but I can also tell with Yan that she also does tape study pretty extensively. I could tell that in her last couple fights, ways that she adjusted for each opponent. So I think both tape study, both have a lot of tape to go off of, for sure. You said, I think people have already forgotten Weili has changed her style in the last 4 fights to exploit her opponent's habits. It's like people only think that Yan Xiaonan is the only one watching film. So the interesting thing about Zhang, and it is getting harder and harder to both tape study against her and also to predict her fights, because she, like you said, like her style changes up so much from fight to fight. Like compare her outlook on the Limoges fight to her outlook in the Joanna fight. They were radically different. And it's almost hard to know what she's going to do, because she does adapt her style so much to her opponent's strengths and weaknesses. So in some ways, like you can say like, oh, well, I think Zhang is going to do this. But it's like, well, that was what her strategy was against Limoges, but against Yan, it may be a little bit different. She's not going to do that, you know? So what you have to look at, I think, is when she's offensive, what are her holes? What are ways that she is making mistakes in her offense, whether that's takedowns or striking defense, things like that. So she is really hard even to study tape against to know what she's going to do. You almost have to think through like, okay, if she's adjusting to my strengths, what could her strategy look like? And then how do I almost make a counter to her counter? It gets really trippy at a point, but looking forward to it. I'm doing the best I can with this breakdown. So what's my opinion on the UFC oversaturation toll and the toll it takes on fighter availability? I compared that having UFC every week is the same as having pizza every day, taking a toll on fighters. Well, hey, I'm telling you that if you sent me off to Italy and I had to eat a margarita pizza every single day, then I would be just fine. I've been to Italy for several weeks at a time, and I ate the same pizza pretty much every single meal, and I was happy. I have basically the same cup of coffee every single morning. So for some people, for some of us, especially those that like routine or like things a lot, having the same thing every day isn't necessarily the worst thing. So there's that. I'll throw that your way. But otherwise, you know, and in the summer, you think about the summer, Tuesdays in the summer, what are you doing in the evening? You're watching Contender Series. It almost doesn't matter who's fighting. You're just there to turn up and show up for these up and coming fighters. So I think for some people, just the rhythm and routine is enough. The one Friday fights thing, you know, doesn't matter as much who's fighting, just that there are fights. You hope that they're exciting. So for some people, I think that is why they do it. For a lot of us, though, we do get a little bit bored of watch. You know, I was like, this is interesting because for the 10 weeks of Contender Series in the summer, we get excited about these. We never complain about the quality of the cards. Basically, what these Apex fights are, for a lot of them, are basically just recycled, revamped Contender Series cards. A lot of the fighters are coming straight from Contender Series, putting them against each other, and that's basically what they are. But it's like, if you look at it that way and just think about it as like a beefed up Contender Series card, you may not have people complaining as long as you still get a pay-per-view every month, maybe one fight night that's in another city and fight in a big arena. So I think it can depend on your perspective a little bit. The biggest argument was that even like trying to give some of these Apex cards a couple bigger fights can take away from the real events that are pay-per-views in big arenas. So that's kind of the argument there. Definitely these smaller shows, the Apex shows, and maybe even a couple bigger fight night shows are affected by, I mean, everything with UFC is changing, right? So like we basically know our pay-per-view schedule for the rest of the year. We don't know all the dates technically, but we know in July, UFC is going to Manchester for a pay-per-view. So they're going to want to put British fighters on there. They're going to, Bilal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards, Tom Aspinall versus somebody in August 18th, UFC 305, going to Perth. Put DDP versus Izzy on there. Put Jack Della Maddalena maybe against like a Shavkat Rakhmonov on there. In September, they've got the Sphere, so Mexican fighters, Grasso versus Shevchenko, Arena Aldana, whoever else they can throw on there. I'm guessing they're going to make it bigger than that. October, you've got Abu Dhabi. In November, you've got New York. So like all their schedule and everything revolves around these shows because they've signed these multi-year tourism deals with these cities. And somewhere Salt Lake City is going to fit in there. Maybe they'll just do a fight night for that. But they've also got an Abu Dhabi show in August. That's part of a big deal. The Saudi Arabia show that just got announced last night. I don't know what kind of deal they have there, if any, but yeah. So everything revolves around these deals where they're the schedule. They have to make these cards as big as they possibly can, and then the Apex shows are basically just like, they're a little bit of insurance. You know, they can bring someone from an Apex show into these bigger shows if they need to. They, yeah, they're suffering from stacking all the pay-per-views so deep. They really want to provide as much value as they can out of their pay-per-views. And I think that there's still some things that are in transition. I think for the UFC, the question is, how can we make as many big names, how can we make names big and make as many of them as we can, to where eventually we can have shows every weekend that are stacked top to bottom. Which I don't know if that's even possible with a roster of 700 fighters. I don't know, but is it oversaturated? Yes. Are things different than they were a couple years ago? I'm not sure if they're all that different. I feel like we would usually get, like the cards used to be different when we were going to Croatia and Atlantic City and Oklahoma City, Shanghai, every weekend somewhere else. They would build the cards a lot differently, rearrange people a lot differently. With these Apex shows, they can really make them with whichever fighters. They're location-less shows. So that way that they can try to stack the bigger shows that are more location-oriented. They can make sure to have those filled out with the right fighters that would you know, be appropriate for those. They have, every time they go to Australia, they got all the Aussies on there, you know. So I think that in some ways we're still in transition. I do think the Apex shows are here to stay. Eventually, when I feel like they have the stars to create bigger shows, then they may leave the Apex. But there's no going backwards, you know. There's no trimming down the roster. There's no reducing the amount of shows. That's not going to happen. I don't feel like it is, unless Netflix comes along or ESPN even changes tone for their next deal and says, hey, we only want 30 events. We don't need 43 or whatever. We only want 30 events, or 35 even. Make these huge shows. We don't want Apex shows, or we want 3 a year. Otherwise, the deal's off. But otherwise, here's a crud ton of money. Way more than your last deal. That's what would change it, is if a potential broadcast partner would do that. But even with that, the UFC, that would be a lot of work to trim the roster and kind of reformat things. So I think it's all about your perspective. Mine is, I think I've just come to say, like, hey, as long as every month we get a pay-per-view and we get a bigger show that's in another city than Las Vegas. We get that, and then maybe 1 or 2 Apex shows. I don't really care all that much, to be honest. The biggest thing with the Apex shows that I don't like is just that the fighters that fight there don't get a live crowd. That's where I feel like they're really suffering. They're not great to watch. Like, the optics are not great. The live crowd thing, that's the biggest thing for me that frustrates me, is the live crowd. Obviously, I would rather have shows in a full arena every weekend if possible, maybe, or I would say maybe 3 weeks out of the month would be best, but otherwise, yeah. Ghost mentioned this on Sound and Pound, but the bite of the night bonus, he said, not only is it outright silly and nonsensical, but it's also insulting and tone deaf to dudes like Trey Ogden, who fought on the same card, and essentially left on red by Dana about getting any compensation for his win bonus after being jabbed in that motor fight by the ref. What's your opinion on the bite of the night bonus and Ghost's opinion of Dana getting a bonus on getting bit being tone deaf? So yeah, this guy, Andre Lima, not only was he losing the fight up to that moment, so he was going to lose the fight most likely if it continued, but he got his, I don't know if he got his win bonus, but got a show bonus. Igor Severino, he got disqualified, so that made him lose the fight. Apparently, he didn't get any of his money, and he got cut. So I feel like if you want to get, like, awarding the guy that got bit doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, awarding him. Maybe if, I don't know, it seems like it was too severe. Severino, there's my pun for the day. To be disqualified and lose, like, you're already losing your win bonus. Being disqualified and not getting your bonus is punishment enough, in my opinion. You're losing out on half of your expected pay. But to both fine him and then cut him, I feel like that's a little bit extreme. I don't know why they did that. I mean, you could make an example of a guy just by disqualifying him. Some people thought that disqualifying him was even a little bit extreme. Like, hey, yeah, take a point away, give him a hard warning, but like, hello, we're able to like cut people open with our elbows, but not bite, and you know, he bit not to the. I'm not saying it, you know, didn't hurt or like it wasn't a flagrant foul that was really, really stupid. It totally was, but I feel like it was extreme and stupid. Like, why would you reward the guy for being bit when he was on the losing end of the fight? I don't know. I agree. That's how I feel about it. Really proud of the read I had on Amanda Hebos last week. No, I might not have Dan Tom's experience in analysis or ghost level of detail where he can work with a UFC champion, but I was right in saying that takedown, that Hebus has bad striking defense, and her only takedown is a head and arm throw that gives up back and bottom position. Yeah, I do think Hebus is a little bit limited in some areas for sure. I felt that, and I think that she's a good fighter, but I think that I don't know if it's a training at your family's gym kind of thing. I think they've done obviously a lot of great work to get her where she is, but I wonder if she's kind of hit her ceiling a little bit, for sure. Just wanted to know your post about Sim Kai-shung ranking third in the UFC Academy. I wonder who the first two high ranks in the UFC Academy were. Number one, this will be surprising. Number one was a featherweight named Ahajang Aili Nuar. Number two, I would pull it up on my phone, but I'm using my phone to live stream this right now, so I can't tell you, but I do have the list. But Ahajang was number two. I too was very surprised about Sim Kai-shung. I wonder if I mean, not to say that he's not a good fighter, really in good shape, but you know, I guess he came prepared. He, for me, seems like a little bit of a deceptively strong guy, but I was very surprised to see that, just knowing how many good athletes there are in the academy this year. But yeah, great for him. You know, great to see a guy from Singapore get a big win like that. And I was chatting with him actually on Instagram, just kind of telling him congratulations. And he said for him, going back to the Shanghai PI was really weird, because the last time he was there, he got brutally knocked out. So it was like this pain, this place of pain and this bad memory. And so for him, going there was a little bit like seeking redemption. And I feel like that definitely motivated him probably to that number 3 spot. And it's just cool to see how like a place can be really redeemed like that, where you tasted defeat at one point, you go back, and then you have this really kind of triumphant return where you can show that you're kind of not totally erased, but like you can add some new memories there that are really positive. a place of strength that was previously a place of defeat. So I thought that was really cool. What do we got next? It'll let me scroll down here. This is how effed my laptop is. All right, here we go. How come people didn't see that Hebos versus Namajunas was a layup for Namajunas, even though Rose looked bad in that fight, which I find great because she is boring now. Yeah, it has a little, I don't know if I'd say slow down, but like she is, I feel like a little bit more meticulous. I don't know if it's a moving up to flyweight thing. Some fighters, as they get older in their career, become more and more measured. So I think there's that too. But I thought that this fight really favored Namajunas as well. And yeah, I agree. I wouldn't call it like a tune-up fight because Hebos was ranked something like number 7 like that. But I do think that it was a really smart fight for Rose Namajunas to take, and the jury's still out on how well she can do at flyweight, though. I don't know if she's going to be out-muscled there. It seems like a 120-pound division would be really good for her. Any way to know all the participants in the UFC Shanghai PI? Yeah, I've meant to post an article on that. I have the list, and I will try to post that in the really near future. Speaking of Izawa, I remember Ghost did a full study on her, and one of the things he said that she gives up positions to go for subs. It wasn't sure that her style would work at the highest level. And that's another reason why I have been cautious. I still don't fully believe that where she's at right now, she could like become a UFC champion. I think that she has a lot of pretty big holes in her game as well. She is like, almost like you think of like an Abdul Agiragimov, if you're familiar with him, the really popular French guy named Lazy King. He has this style where he gets just like beat up for the majority of the fight. And then in the third round, he'll submit you with a triangle choke. He is so crafty on the ground. And in some ways, I almost think that Seika Izawa is a little bit like that. And I hopefully that doesn't come off as a huge diss, but like, yeah, like against Miyu Yamamoto, she got taken down and held down. She was firing off submissions, and she did eventually submit Miyu Yamamoto off of a bad takedown that Yamamoto tried. But I think that Izawa is a very deceptive fighter like that. You can think you're winning, and then she'll find a way to sneak a submission in there. But I think if she faced a really strong wrestler that also had a good submission defense, I don't know if things would fare so well for her. Or just a really elite striker with good takedown defense. How would things go for her? Jury's still out on that. Isn't Stamp Fairtex supposed to be fighting Denise Zamboanga first? She is. That's what's so weird about this. They have double booked her. Is one that disrespectful to double book a fighter like that? Now the thing is that even if Stamp loses, well, if she loses, I don't know what kind of damage she will have taken, and if that'll impact the fight. But this is at a weight class higher than hers, so technically, like, if she loses but is still in good shape, she's lost her belt, but she can still challenge Xiong Jingnan. It just won't be like a champ versus champ fight. And it's also up in weight as well, so it's not like, I know one's weight cutting stuff is all wonky, but like, I don't think it'll be a toll on her body, you know, to try to cut weight or whatnot. So if you're gonna double book someone, I think that's the best way to do it, but I've never liked double booking people ever anyways. It just gets kind of weird when you do that. So James saying, I think it's fair to say since Weili versus Rose 2, their careers have gone in different directions. Weili has gotten better while Rose has degraded quite a bit. Rose fans insist that Rose would beat Weili without even trying. When I said that I'm in the Reddit community, their only response to me is that Rose has 2 wins over Weili, not knowing that it actually proves my point that Rose's best win in 3 years was Weili. Yeah, I'd agree with you there, and I also am with you that I think if they fought again, I don't know what weight class that would be at, if it would be flyweight or 115, but I do think that Weili wins. I agree that she has improved a lot, whereas Rose, I think, has gotten a little bit more tentative and also gone up in weight as well. So she may still be just figuring out the flyweight thing. I don't know what's next for her. Maybe like Macy Barber or the loser of Manon Fiorot versus Erin Blanchfield could be interesting, but yeah, I feel like I need to see a little bit more out of her before I'm ready to say that she's ready to make a run at the title, for sure. Way asking, also, what's the current situation of the few foreign fighters training at the UFC PI? Are they going to participate in Road to UFC? So those are Punyajit Likaru, Sim Kai Xiong. I don't think Yudi Coyote made it, but I do think I've heard conflicting things about Clinton DeCruz. At first I heard that he was going to do it, but then some people said like, no, he was never offered a spot and isn't going. So, yeah, I'm still unsure about Clinton DeCruz, but Punyajit Likaru and Sim Kai Xiong, yeah, they're going to be training there. They've got a full year at the UFC PI, be able to train there for free. I don't think that Punyajit Likaru has a fight with Road FC on April 13th, so he's not going to be in Road to UFC this year. Also, I think that, well, he's better than some of the Indian fighters that they've chosen for Road to UFC, but personally, I would like to see him get a win or two over some better competition before he goes to Road to UFC. Sim Kai Xiong, he has a fight on April 28th in the Philippines against, what's that guy's name? I can't remember his name, but if you look on the calendar on my website, you'll see it. He's fighting a 6-0 Filipino guy in the Philippines on April 28th. So both those guys have fights booked, so they're not going to be in Road to UFC. Nope. What is a custom? Okay, yeah, I answered that earlier. What other venues in Asia that the UFC can go to besides China and Singapore? Well, the Indonesia Arena in Jakarta is a brand new arena that just opened last year. I think around 16,000 seats. And the hope, I don't know if it's sure plans just yet, but the hope is that they would go there in the fall for a UFC event. That's a big one. As far as India goes, I don't think that there is one there that they could use just yet. I've looked around extensively. I actually posted an Instagram reel and a YouTube short, so you can go back after this and check it. But I did some research on venues that the UFC could go to in Asia, and trying to find venues that were like above 12,000 seats, that looked modern, newly updated, or had even held combat sports events before. And I did post those. So go check that out after. There was a couple in China. In Thailand, they could do the Impact Arena. I think there's also a new arena in Bangkok as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC has had some early conversations about going there. So expect that. I wouldn't think this year, but maybe in the next couple years. They had plans to go to the Almaty Arena in Kazakhstan before, so I would expect we'll see that in the next. I would say we could see that even this year, going to Almaty, Kazakhstan. But those are the main ones I could think of. I mean, you can go back to Saitama Super Arena. You can go back to the wherever they went to in Seoul and Busan, South Korea. They've been to the I forget what it's called, Universiade something in Guangzhou. They've been to Beijing before. To Cadillac Arena, although I think it might be renamed now. But there's a handful of arenas in China, mostly on the East Coast, that I think that they could go to. Oh, so Gunther saying, I've been to the Sphere in Las Vegas. There is no platform big enough inside for a sporting event. Why is the UFC planning? Hey, I mean, you go on ESPN.com, UFC.com, they have it on there. I don't know how they're going to do it, but Dana White is insistent that he is going to figure out how to hold an event in the Sphere. I have no clue. Like, how do you even make use of that technology, the screen? I don't know. I'd have to see more concerts and how the spherical dome was used in concerts to really imagine that. But like, I'm guessing, I don't know, if you have a sphere, a part of the sphere is like a Jumbotron screen where they've got the, the thing is that for a cage fight, a small cage, I also don't know how many seats the sphere holds, but a cage fight with a huge screen like that, it's almost like the screen is distracting you so much from the cage that I don't know, being there it'd just be so interesting. I don't know how they would utilize that at all. It's cool that you got to go to the Sphere, though. I would love to be able to go there someday, but I'm as interested as you are. But no, it is official. They're doing it. It's on all the websites. They're doing the Mexican Independence Day thing, so they're hoping to have Grasso versus Shevchenko 3 there. Probably some other really big fights too, so I have no idea. No clever pun today from Rain. I find it very strange that Rose fans online keep saying that Weili is ducking when, well, yeah, I think we talked about this last week. Yeah, they're on different weight classes now. So I think the only way that happens is if Weili cleans out the 115 division and then goes up to strawweight, which I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, honestly. I agree. She's already has 2 wins over Weili, despite the second one being close. I don't get that reasoning. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just hardcore Rose fans getting behind their fighter, but there's no ducking going on when their fighter is pieced out of the weight class, for sure. Otherwise, I don't understand. Let's see, Raynell, I wasn't sure what you're referring to. Not think that it's his fault. Don't know how the fights will play out. Are you familiar with Ali Abdelaziz? I am. He often uses his fighters' accounts to say that everyone is ducking his fighters to promote them. How does that help the fighters in any way? I don't know, and I think the overall saying that a fighter is ducking someone else overall is not a really helpful way to talk about things, because a lot of fighters, like most fighters, turn down fights, and whether it's for injury or for Ramadan, like turning down a fight is still turning down a fight any way you want to say it. And so his fighters turn down fights and all the time too. So I don't really understand that logic. I don't know what the truth is behind like the Umar Nurmagomedov story about supposedly fighters ducking him. I mean, Corey Sandhagen has wanted to fight him for a long time. And the guy also only has 4 fights in the UFC. And so he's been making his way up through the division. So I also understand why someone who's ranked wouldn't want to fight him when he wasn't ranked. So, yeah, that's also another reason, like super high risk, low reward. If you beat someone like Umar who wasn't ranked and you're a ranked fighter. So, yeah, I don't know what the whole story is behind there. Oh boy. Cornelius asking, thoughts on Jamie Varner saying Laura Sanko is a bad commentator when she is objectively a better commentator than DC. I agree. I mean, my top commentators are John Anik and Laura Sanko and Paul Felder. That would be my ideal team. And John Gooden as well. I'm a big fan of him as well. I don't understand. I hate to like accuse people of being like sexist, but it does to me. I literally see zero merit, and everyone that I saw was defending Laura Sanko, including fighters and other commentators. And it was just weird. I mean, if you go and look at Jamie Varner's Twitter, I think it makes a little bit more sense why he would do that. Basically, his whole Twitter account is complaining. is saying this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. He seems like a very, very negative kind of person, and the things that he complains about usually feed into a lot of culture warsy kind of stuff, very far right politics. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that he would complain about that, and because of that, I don't really take his opinion seriously, and I move on with my day because Laura Senko is an A+ level commentator, and we all know it too. Remembering my gripe with Umar Nurmagomedov, yeah, I just touched on that. I don't understand it either. Me see here. Why do I often see people right before Weili's fights that our opponent will do better than expected? They said that about Esparza, Weili's. Well, you'll always be able to find people that have a contrary opinion. You always will. And there's every fighter, no matter how popular or unpopular, every fighter does have a fan base. And every fighter, or most fighters, have a sort of counter fan base too. So you're going to see that every time. Honestly, I'd say get used to it. It's going to happen for every single fight. It happened with Tayla Santos against Valentina Shevchenko. It happens every time, all the time. It's happened with all of Weili's fights. You're going to see it with Jan versus Zhang. So, yeah, it's a part of the sport, I would say. Let's see. Thoughts on Ren Ozaki? Does he stand a chance against Joe Passi's grappling? I'm not sure. I actually wasn't even familiar with Ren Ozaki when that got announced. So I need to look into him a little bit more. I haven't seen any of his fights, hadn't even really heard his name before. Or at least he was someone I kind of just moved past, didn't really take note of. So I do need to check in on him. Daramisi is a tough guy to fight. I don't know who the other bantamweight competitors are, but I would think, I mean, you got to think, like, knowing the four that we know right now, Bargung and Daramisi are the two best of those four. I was like, I could see them being in the finals, which would suck because I know they're friends. They're both Kazakh guys and some similar strengths as well. So both PI guys. But yeah, I don't know about Ren Ozaki. Tape study wise, I think Weili is a massive advantage over because of who her coaching staff is. Does Jan have an all-time great grappler? No, she doesn't. She does do film study. I touched on it earlier. Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with you. I touched on that a little bit. Yeah. And I'll dive into that more on my Weili versus Yan Shannon video as well. Have I planned my trip to the Shanghai PI yet? I know China prohibits certain platforms. How would you film your interviews and documentaries? Good question. So have you noticed how a lot of people in China post, like a lot of Chinese fighters post on their Instagram? I've lived in China before, and so I've used, I know my way around a VPN, and I have one now, and so I would intend to use that. I think some parts of Shanghai actually allow different social media platforms. However, even if I can't like post same day in China, the point is that I would film, I think, and maybe do some photo shoots too, for things that I could even post a month or two or even 3 later. The stuff I'm gonna do, there will be some timely stuff, but most of it will be like, let's take a look at this gym, let's interview this fighter, let's do a photo shoot with this fighter. It'll be things like that because I'm not gonna have the time. Like, I'm thinking through, like, going to be taking trains from city to city, and I'm thinking like, yeah, that's going to be a lot of my editing time will be on trains, because I'm not going to go to China to sit on my laptop and edit videos. So I may put out some stuff while I'm there, especially more on the photo side, but a lot of the stuff will come out in the months to come after that. So in that way, I'm not too worried. I've also got the VPN. I have not booked the trip yet. The plane tickets, it's still not the best time to book plane tickets. And then getting a visa, you really want to do that like a month to 6 weeks before. I don't know why it's that early, but I'm checking in on that. So yeah, I'm planning the trip for sure. And I have got the open invite from the guys there to come tour the facility and hang out there. So that's all good. I'll just, what's interesting is that I'm wondering if the Road to UFC semifinals will actually coincide with my time there. So there could be a chance you see me go to Indonesia as part of that time too. So in some ways, I'm kind of waiting for things to get announced, like events to get on the docket. But yeah, kind of laying the groundwork for that now. Would I ever be a special guest on Sound and Pound with Drake and Alex? Would love to. My dream show would be me, Drake Riggs, Alex B, and Dane. Yeah, that'd be a blast. Would love that. I've done some One Championship live companions with Drake Riggs and other people before too. So we've done a few things together. And yeah, Lazy King, I like him a lot because he subs bigger. Yeah, he's a super fun fighter. Always tune in for that guy. Right now saying, I've seen some people dunk on Mick Maynard when he asked about when the last bad card was. Are people right to dunk on him? I've been watching the last few, and the Apex events are quite bad, but that's, yeah, and what you said, like you have to see the fights play out, basically. I also partially agree with that, because sometimes fights are way better than you expect, and was it last week? It was like the Felipe Lins versus OSP fight ended up being amazing, and I thought that fight was going to be a stinker, honestly. So you never know. I do think in some ways Mick Maynard, that comment can be a little bit out of touch. Like for him to be like, yeah, I literally don't know what people are upset about. That shows me that he's a little bit in a bubble, not really understanding like, hey, like we liked it better when we were in a different city every week and we had mostly full arenas every time, or at least just like sound, some kind of vibe, some kind of audience. Like I feel like he's a little bit out of touch with that. And the thing is like he knows these fighters pretty well and he knows their capabilities. He and Sean signed these fighters. So like for him, like he is probably way more excited about these cards than we are, because he is invested a lot more into them. So in some ways he's like, yeah, I don't know, like he's enjoying himself with these fight cards. So in one way I see it that way, but I think like if you really try to put yourself in the shoes of fighters and fans who are getting annoyed at the Apex, I think he is a little bit out of touch. So I see it from both sides, really. How do I feel about the Mola Cage Warriors whole drama? Like a lot of Indonesians seem mad and angry about it, especially for Reza, since he got sent home a week before his fight. I know, I am upset about that too. So what happened, if you're not aware, so there was, Cage Warriors has something called the Cage Warriors Academy. In San Diego, California, they bring in European fighters and Indonesian fighters to this gym, Studio 504, which is run by Mark Fiore, probably overseen by Graham Boylan, who runs Cage Warriors. And they bring in fighters there with the hopes of giving them some solid training, probably like paid for training, scholarships. They want to put them on Cage Warriors events and kind of just like help develop the sport of MMA in a couple countries, which is a fine idea. But the problem is that Cage Warriors as a promotion, they also manage these fighters. And so it's like you are promoter, matchmaker, manager, and coach all in one. And that is a major problem, because what happened is last week they posted a video where they filmed this meeting between the coaches of Studio 504 and Reza Arianto and Ephraim Ginting, basically saying that, hey, you guys just aren't working hard enough in the gym. Ephraim, you keep getting submitted over and over and over. Y'all are too lazy, and we've got to let you guys go. We've also canceled your upcoming fights. So, if a gym kicks someone out, that's up to them. But canceling the fights is a big problem. And that was something that would never happen if you didn't have this like dark trifecta of manager, promoter, and gym. You get kicked out, your fight's canceled. Normally, if you get kicked out of a gym, you just go train somewhere else. Your fight's still on. You can still fight and make money. And then if you lose because you were too lazy in training, then that's on you. You don't get paid your full show and win. So punishing a guy like Reza Arianto, who had a fight this Saturday in Cage Warriors, is just a really, really disrespectful and harsh to this fighter, and is really upsetting to me personally. So that really frustrates me a lot. The reason that they filmed, I asked a friend, I was like, why are they like filming this and posting this? This seems like this should have been a private conversation, because this seems really embarrassing for these guys. It's for Mola Sport. They air kind of episodes of Cage Warriors Academy, and kind of giving you inside look at training, sometimes on news, things like that. So almost like a tough kind of thing, but super frustrating. There's a reason why a promoter should only be a promoter and not connected to management or coaching. And people have asked about that with like the PI and the UFC before, and they have some boundaries. They're not doing any matchmaking. They're not doing any in-cage coaching. But yeah, it's a big problem and super frustrating, and I don't like it. And I think because of that, Indonesian fighters may want to think twice about going to the Cage Warriors Academy, even though they're giving you maybe better training than you had for a scholarship. But I think you want to rethink that for sure, because of, I think, breaches and conflicts of interest like that. And then James, this might be the last question. My question in general: does anyone have a ghost on their? No, I don't know. That the short answer to the question is I don't know. Leon Edwards, Cejudo in his prime, Whaley are the only ones that have that. The short answer is I don't know, because I'm not familiar with everybody and their training situations to know what kind of minds they have available to help with tape study. I gotta think that there are some fighters that get really into that and bring people along for that. I gotta think that out of the UFC roster, there's plenty that do that. But there's only one ghost. There's only one Cejudo, this or that. So, but I think it'll probably become a bigger thing for sure going forward. And then like my idea of stacking non-tournament bouts with Indonesians for Road UFC semis in Jakarta. Which fighters do you think have a high chance of filling that and could have success? Yudi Kayati, Wendry Patalima, Denny Dafa would be one. It's hard because One Pride has atomweight and strawweight as well for men, and so there could be some of that. You could also have Dwi Ani Retno-Wulan, the women's strawweight champion, who I've confirmed will not be in Road to UFC this year. But you could also have her on there. Who else? I mean, you could bring in Steve Suardi. Just Just give him a shot. Not necessarily. It's not even so much like a UFC fight on the line or a UFC contract on the line. Just something to bring in fans to the arena and just kind of create a cool moment with that. So my only thing is like, let the Indonesians have some space with their walkouts. It'd be Indonesians have some of the best walkouts in MMA right now. Country for country, it's like Indonesia and Japan have the best walkouts. So I would be sad if it just all got scrubbed down to nothing, basically. But that's how I feel. All right, guys, thanks for hanging with me today. Great stuff on the podcast. Really appreciate all of your support. Enjoy UFC Atlantic City this weekend, JCK, everything coming up in the weeks to come with UFC 300. And yeah, enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and enjoy the fights.